Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Xicanx, Dreamers and Changemakers, live from the Museum of Anthropology at UBC. My name is Sasha Schertzer, Teen Librarian at VPL, and on behalf of both the library and the Museum of Anthropology, we are so pleased you could all join us today. This program is taking place on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Unceded means that this land was never sold or given away. If you are joining us from elsewhere, please feel free to let us know in the chat. And if you know to whom the land traditionally belongs, please include that information as well. Xicanx, Dreamers and Changemakers is an exhibition showcasing artists of Mexican-American heritage who self-identify as Xicanx, a term that transcends borders and gender to encompass the Xicanx people's multi-generational experiences of social differences. There is a digital supplement to this exhibition, Xicanx Digital, available that amplifies the scope of the exhibition. The link will be shared during the presentation and again at the end for you to explore at your leisure. The presentation will take approximately 45 minutes. You will have the opportunity to ask questions during the presentation. We will also be holding time for questions at the end. Please use the question and answer function on Zoom to ask any questions related to the presentation. My colleague Jean will be on hand to assist with any technical questions that arise from the audience. Because this is a webinar, we have limited capacity to troubleshoot, but we'll do our best to help. Please put any technical questions in the chat. During the presentation, we welcome audience comments in the chat. We are sure that many will be moved by the artwork featured in the tour. Please be kind and courteous in your words. The program is being recorded and will be made available online after the presentation. We are very excited to introduce you to our presenters for the morning and grateful to them for sharing their time, passion, and expertise with us. Greta de León and Jill Baird are the co-curators of Xicanx. Greta de León is the Executive Director of the Americas Research Network with a long career promoting, curating, and amplifying Latin American art and culture. Dr. Jill Baird is a curator of education at the Museum of Anthropology. She works alongside artists, cultural practitioners, and cultural educators from diverse and distinct communities. Thank you so much for being here today, Greta and Jill. The floor is yours. Please take it away.
Thank you, Sasha. It's great to be here on the cyberwebs and to accompany you and to see Xicanx also online. It's pretty great. Hola, Jill.
Hello, everyone. Can you see? I too am here in person in the exhibition. It's nice to join you all electronically and to see Greta from Mexico City. Isn't it amazing what technology can do we can do nowadays? So I'm going to start off our tour. So I'm Jill Baird, and I've had an amazing opportunity of co-curating this exhibition called Xicanx, Dreamers and Changemakers. Excuse me. It took about 3 years for this exhibition to get started, and working during a pandemic has a certain sort of flavor to our work. So this digital world is becoming more comfortable to us. But I'm going to start here by introducing myself. I'm the curator of education, as was already mentioned. I'm a settler of Irish, French, and Scottish background, and I'm working on the unceded territories of the Hunkaminam-speaking Musqueam people here at UBC. And I'm standing in front of our first artwork, which always brings joy to my heart when I come down the hallway here and see this work by Alejandro Diaz, saying, "Make tacos, not war." Seems simple, doesn't it? A statement that maybe if we all joined each other at the dinner table or went out and had a meal together, how we could heal the harms of the world. The artist is Alejandro Diaz, and he's out of New York City currently. And I just think it's a really important beginning to this show. Why it's an important beginning? Because it's just a statement. It's a statement that would be really hard to disagree with. But also it reflects the artist's own passions and interests of using signage, sometimes very common signage, but delivering it in a new way, making you maybe think a bit deeper or provoking it. An interesting piece of history for this piece is that Alejandro Diaz, when he moved after art school to New York City, he found it a bit hard to find work and to get paid as an artist. So he started making signs out of cardboard and Sharpies. A famous one he's well known for was holding a sign that says Audrey Hepburn stood here, and he's holding the sign outside of the very famous jewelry store, Tiffany's in New York City. And anyways, someone bought his sign, they bought the photograph of him holding his sign, and it's not the only kind of artwork Alejandro does, but he's kept on with this sort of simple signage that actually, when you think about it for a minute, maybe is not that simple. It's a good introduction into the exhibition. We're going to move in, and I'm going to pass it over to Greta.
Hi, I'm Greta de León, and I am connecting from Mexico right now. It has been a lot of joy, fun, and intensity to do this show with Jill, and to showcase the art of these amazing artists that are also activists. So one of the important things about Chicano and Chicanx, yeah? Someone said something? Sorry.
No, I think you're good.
Yeah?
Go ahead.
Okay. About Chicano and Chicanx is that it's a chosen identity. They self-proclaim as Chicano. It's an artistic movement, and it's a social and an activist movement for access to equal rights by this group of Mexican Americans. So in order for themselves to be called Chicano, Chicana, or Chicanx, it's kind of like an active role. And one of the active roles that they have used is how they have reclaimed their space and their neighborhoods through art. So this wall here that you will see, it's a projection of all these different street art and murals throughout the United States by Chicano, Chicana, Chicanx artists. And they varied. We wanted to showcase, it was kind of hard and interesting to be able to show murals inside of a gallery. So they came up with the amazing idea of screening them, projecting them on the walls, and you will see the diversity. You can go online to the website, and you can see these murals with their locations. So they are all throughout the state. So we have in Texas, in California, in New York, in New Mexico, in Detroit, in Chicago. So they are all over, and wanted to show you that the Chicano artistic movements and the Chicanos are everywhere in the state. So this was a way that we use that. And one of the things that we wanted to also tell you about the exhibit is Chicanx. We spell it with an X at the beginning to pay not homage, but to recognize the indigenous roots in their original territory, in the Nahuatl speaking countries. So the sound of CH that is represented by the Spaniards, the Nahuatl, is spelled with an X, and the X at the end is to signify inclusivity. So that's why the name is spelled as of the exhibit is spelled like that. You want to add something, Jill, about the murals?
No, I think that, thank you. I just think it's would be an amazing trip, actually. Take a road trip and drive around the United States just looking for Chicano, Chicanx murals. We're going to move to the next work, and it's by an artist named Esther Hernandez. There's over 33 artists in the show. So this morning, we're just giving you a real snapshot of the exhibition. So this is called Libertad by Esther Hernandez. What are your thoughts, Greta?
Yeah, Mi Libertad, this is a really, really important print. Esther Hernandez is a very established and kind of like the old school and one of the beginners of the Movimiento. It's one of the iconic leaders, artistic leaders, and a fantastic artist. And the way she worked this piece is you have the Statue of Liberty, right? That is like everybody knows it. But then you have this woman that is carving away her identity in this structure. So underneath the Statue of Liberty, where she is carving away, is a Mayan stela. So I think this piece really hits on the essence of the movement and on the exhibit. You see Aztlán. Aztlán is the name of their ancestral homeland for the Chicanos. Chicanos it's a really interesting composition and cultural composition and genetic composition. They are Mexican-American descent, but at the same time, they are US citizens, right? So it's not like anybody can claim to be a Chicano. They have a very specific set of concerns and of issues that they wanted to address. And the connection to the indigeneity, it's very important for them, these linkages, and to embrace these linkages and to embrace this origin. So I think this piece is very appropriate to show you what we wanted to say in the exhibit and to summarize a lot of the work of the artist.
Thank you, Greta. Greta mentioned something called El Movimiento, and I encourage you all to do a little bit more research, but a way of saying it in English is the Chicano civil rights movement. We may be familiar with the Black history of the United States, slavery, and the civil rights movement. I think many of us, particularly in Canada, have a lot to learn about the Chicano civil rights movement. And like the artists in this exhibition, including Esther, the role of artists in these kind of social justice movements. We're going to move on to another work. Follow me into the gallery.
So while we follow Jill, I'll just mention very briefly that the whole exhibit is bilingual. It was very important for us that the words of the artists are showcased and respected the way that they have chosen to use their language. So all the text, all the poetry that is accompanying the exhibit, all the labels, everything is in English and Spanish, but the spelling in English and Spanish is according to the artist.
I'm going to start at this piece by San Antonio artist Deborah Kutzpal-Vasquez, but I'm going to start with a piece of poetry. All throughout the exhibition, there's poetry by Chicano writers and thinkers and theorists and poets that accompanies the artwork as a way to actually spur our thinking and maybe get us to jump into some creative pools that are new to us. So I'm going to start with the one beside this work by Sandro Cisnero. I've put up with too much, too long, and now I'm just too intelligent, too powerful, too beautiful, too sure of who I am finally to deserve anything less. And so we're standing here, or I'm standing here in front of this work by Deborah called Citlali. And she's fierce, don't you think? She's a superhero or an anti-hero. Deborah Kutzpal-Vasquez is a very strong Chicana feminist and a queer activist. And she really wants the woman's body to be seen as a powerful, take no guff, if I may say so. On Citlali, we have on her chest a very common figure, the Virgin of Guadalupe. But this Virgin of Guadalupe, she's on fire because of the passion and strength that this woman holds, but also because of the history that this woman represents. If we look around the surroundings that Citlali's in, we have the moon and the stars through the windows in the kitchen. We have the foods, traditional foods she's being surrounded by, from frijole, maize, maguey, chile, calabazo, nopal, and amaranto. These are all really important foods, but what Deborah's trying to make relationships to is the matriarchy, the women in her lives, her grandmothers and great-grandmothers and aunts who are part of her teachings. And I guess to remind us all that your teachings don't only come from books, your teachings can come from the kitchen table around the people who love you and are trying to teach you. And so she does that by painting this superhero in a kitchen. And you can look up Deborah Vasquez on the digital catalog, and you can see she's done quite a few sitlalis. And for those of you who are like the zine world, she's also a pretty amazing zine maker. She sees the value in these cheap, quick, printed images or booklets that speak to an issue. So she's used zine making as part of her artistic practice for many, many years now.
I'm going to make a comment also on the food. So the Chicano artistic movement and the Chicano movement is really wide, and it has many manifestations. And one of it is literature, some of it is filmmaking, music, and cuisine. So in our digital catalog on Xicanx Digital, the website there, you can find recipes from the artists that they like to eat. So if you want to try to cook some Xicanx food, you can also find interesting recipes in the website.
On our way to the next location, I'm just going to ask Amina, who I didn't introduce. So Amina Chergi is the education coordinator here at the Museum of Anthropology and our talented camera woman today. She's just going to take a spin around so you can sort of see the context of all of this work. And then we're going to move to a very powerful work. Actually, I think all the work in the show is really powerful. It's actually a hard thing to do, to ask a curator to choose 8 or 7 pieces in an exhibition when there's over 40 and that you love every one of them. So Amina's giving you just a little bit of context for the show. And we could do an entire another conversation about the art of actually making a show. What is curation? What kind of design is required? How many arguments do you have over wall colors? But that's a different tour. We're going to move to this work here. We're going to start with a map and a quote that's very common in the Chicanx world, which is, "We did not cross the border crossed us." And then we're going to move to the work by Carlos Fresquez called Salón de los
Ilegales, yeah. This map will really put into perspective what happened in 1848 after the US and Mexico war. Mexico lost half of its territory to the United States. So the United States used to be that. And Mexico used to go all the way to Texas, California, Arizona, New Mexico. Florida was French. I mean, Louisiana, sorry, was French. And you could see, so when we talked about the Chicanos and Chicanas, they have this sense that they were there before. They were forced into speak English. So when they talked about being colonized once and twice, they were colonized 3 times, right? One by the Spaniards, by the Mexican government, and then by the US. And their language was forbidden. So they were not able to speak Spanish in their schools anymore. They suddenly, from one day to the next, they became US citizens and their language was English. So a lot of the Spanish that the Chicano and Chicana and Mexican Americans use is Spanglish, and is this amazing creation of mixing and navigating between the 2 languages and the 2 cultures. So we wanted to show you this first to give you a sense of the space and how their lives changed. So when they say we didn't cross the border crossed us, nosotros no cruzamos la frontera nos atravesó, that's what it means, right? And the next piece is by Carlos Fresquez. And Carlos Fresquez is a really interesting artist. He's going to be soon in I think, or was last week, speaking with Jill and the museum. And he created these landscapes that he found in like thrift shops. And they're like these iconic landscapes of the trees or the mountains or beach scenes. And he used like a stencil to print out this image of this family running, right? So when you see the street signs in the highway saying like careful bears or deer crossing or students crossing or something, In California, they used to have a street sign that will warn you for immigrants crossing. The last street sign was disappeared in 2018. Fortunately, nobody wanted to put them back, because it's not like a street sign that makes you want to be concerned about the well-being of these families crossing illegally the border, right? They warn you not to damage your car and don't like hit on them. So it's a little bit strong, the image. And Carlos, what he did is, I'm trying to give validity or give them legality by placing this image in throughout different landscapes of the United States. And by doing that, I'm making legal the illegal, or permanent the impermanent. And I think intellectually is a really interesting way or action, and at the same time emotionally just moves and touches a lot of points. So you can see the enormous diversity of the land, and at the same time you have this family that was running through a better life and in a land that it was used to be theirs. So there's a lot of food for thought. So this work is Salón de los Ilegales by Carlos Fresques.
May I just add something to that, Greta? That Carlos has shown this work in various ways. And for this installation, we wanted to put the images of the different kinds of landscapes all across the United States, so that we also move away from the idea that Chicanx or Chicano, Xicanx, people are only close to borders. Currently, more than 130 million people in the United States have Spanish as a first language. So we're not talking about those aren't all people who are Chicano or Chicanx, but it just goes to say, maybe for us to learn more about the actual histories and where people live and make families and contribute to communities across the United States. We're going to move on to I'm sorry, Greta, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to very briefly mention, when Amina gave the little show of the exhibit, is we organized the exhibit a little bit thematically. You will see that more in the digital catalog. So this area, we call it the borderlands. We don't talk about the border region. I mean, we don't talk about the borderline as a line, because it is a region. And it's a region that shares environments, that shares family, that shares languages, that shares a lot. So this part where we are right now looking at the work is the borderlands. That was all I was saying.
Thank you. And I'll just also do another recitation of one of the poets that is in the wall that helps us think as well through these artworks and these issues. This is a quote by Gloria Ilanzaldúa. I walk through a hole in the fence to the other side. Under my fingers, I feel the gritty wire rusted by 139 years of the salty breath of the sea. I think for me, these poetic elements just add depth and sort of strength to already powerful artworks. We're going to move over now to a print. I don't know if anybody on the Zoom call is an artist or who works in your schools on printmaking, but printmaking was a really important, continues to be a really important artistic choice by many Chicanx artists. Even from the 1970s during El Movimiento, prints you could make duplicates, or you could make many and spread them far. You could use them as posters in order to support your protests. So printmaking is a really important part of the Chicano civil rights movement and the Chicanx arts movement. Here's a piece by Celeste Luna. And it's both heartbreaking and powerful. It's called Our Lady of the Checkpoint. Like on the chest of Citlali, we have another image of the Virgin of Guadalupe. But this time, instead of the aura of fire and beauty around this aura, we have barbed wire. So this is a woman who's trying to cross the border. And Celeste is very eloquent and strong in her concerns and pointing us to her concerns about the role of women and how women in these situations of border crossings are often harmed to a much greater extent than others. Here we have a small camera. You can see as you would be your image taken as you cross the border. But here we don't have a person, we have a skeleton. So they don't see the humanity. They move past the individual to the person, to this skeletal form. You can see the American flag and the Mexican flag. I don't know, is this a border that you would want to cross? Imagine what kind of power and hope and determination you would have to have if you're not greeted by a welcome. Instead, you're greeted by violence or hatred or homophobia or racism. It's quite a large print too. Again, for any of you printmakers, pulling prints that are this large, that's actually quite a technical skill. Anything you'd like to add, Greta, before I move on?
No, well, maybe if Amina can just show our third conceptual Virgen of Guadalupe, no, the work by Ricky Armendariz.
Yes, we could stop here. That's a great idea.
This is also kind of like another image of the Virgen de Guadalupe. So you see the halo around this jug of water, and you see the landscape of the border. And this is kind of what for someone who is crossing the border in the desert, people will leave these plastic jugs of water filled with water along the way to help them and help them survive this really difficult way. So when this artist puts the halo of the Virgen de Guadalupe around a jug of water, we think it was very also moving and strong.
And I'll just add another point to that. It's also, it's called Agua Mi Vida. And there are now groups of people who actually mark safe passage across the borders using these water jugs so that they know people are coming and they want to make sure that at the minimum they have enough to survive this fairly treacherous journey. You can see the landscape in the back, which is actually quite on some border crossings, quite desert-like. So the need for water is even more extreme. And for the artists in the crowd, it's also half painting, half carving. The image is actually etched into this wooden board. So it's a beautiful acrylic painting, but the artist has etched it. I don't know if you can get the angle there, where you can see it's actually carved into the surface of the paint. How are we doing for time, Sasha? You might have to give us a...
Very good, very good. Got about 20 minutes.
Once you get Greta and I talking, we could go forever. So the next work we're in front of is an entire wall of portraits, black and white, beautifully rendered, just beautiful faces. The work is called Justice for Our Lives. And it's by an artist named Ori Original. It's a name that he's chosen for this particular work. His name, if you want to search some of his other artwork, and you can see that on the Xicanx digital, is Daniel Jimenez. This is quite a powerful and very often disturbing work for many people. So I'm just going to give you a bit of a warning. This work can be highly emotional for the viewer. And of course, it was very emotional for the artists. It's 100 portraits of Black and brown people, Black people in Chicano, Chicanx, who have been killed by the police since the year 2000. So it speaks directly to police violence, racial profiling, racism and homophobia. But what Ori has done is opened up this beautiful window into these people. So it's called Justice for Our Lives. He's gotten consent. He has a very ethical practice. He's gotten consent from all of the families. That's where he gets the photographs that he works with to do his portraits. He gets the details of the situation. And sometimes that's the only place these details are publicly accessible. How did it happen? Where did it happen? Who was involved? Families have often relied on his documentation in order to get a bit more information about the loss of their loved ones. It also moves away from statistics, how many people are killed by the police, and puts a full name and a beautiful image. So they, one, are not forgotten, but also they are people, they have families, they were loved. We have a summer Indigenous youth program here at the museum. And this summer they trained to become tour guides. These young Indigenous high school students became tour guides of this exhibition. And one of them, who was Afro-Indigenous, really took to this work. First, she was pained by seeing it, tears and worry. And then she started looking and she said, I wonder if the artist made it black and white so that first you see their humanity.
That's nice.
And I thought, you know, for all of us, we all have so much to learn, but also we need to see each other's humanity first, and then continue that in our bodies, in our minds, and our souls. They're powerful portraits. One other, just a side note about the curatorial process and working to put up an exhibition. Both Greta and I were completely struck by this work, and it needed to have a very large presence in the gallery. These histories need to be better known. In the installation, these are free. You can go onto his website. He charges no money. You can download them and spread them around. He would be very happy to see them on telephone poles and street sides. So when we put it up, we used wheat paste like you were if you were doing postering around town. But we invited the people who put it up to remember the name of one of the people that they put on the wall. That included myself, my staff, my grandkids, and a group of Latino artists who came in and helped paint these onto the wall. It seemed like a nice gesture to also keep that remembrance in place. Greta, was there anything you would like to add?
No.
All right.
You did it beautifully.
Maybe just a minute to reflect on all these people, boys, girls, men, women. You could also give a scan of this space, this exhibition, this part of the exhibition. We call this the sort of activist area, which in all truth, every artist in this show is an activist. But we just thought that some of the work speaks more directly to making sure the history of these communities is documented. And the way artists choose to do that is never straightforward. It's always a nuanced, and in this case, very often very political. We're going to go to another work, and this time we're going to let the artist speak for a little while, and then Greta can fill you in. We've come in with the video going halfway, so I'm just going to put the mic to the. This is a work by David Zamora Casas, and it's called The Altar for the Spirit of Huasquachismo, dedicated to the memory of David.
Tomás Ibarra Frausto y Dudley Moore.
Beaner is a slur, insulting ancient rich culinary history of Mexican cuisine by calling people like me who eat beans, beaner. Montezuma comía frijoles. With purity of emotion and depth of the highest vibration. This altar installation honors the author of the essay Rascuachismo, a Chicano sensibility, and is dedicated to the late Mr. Dudley Brooks, paying tribute to the both living genius and the dearly departed. Since the day they met, July 22nd, 1968, Don Tomás Ibarra Frausto and Dudley Brooks have shared a spiritual union, 53 years. On a March morning in 2022, Dudley Brooks transitioned into the infinite power of the universe. Mr. Brooks fell into a deep, deep sleep, shutting his eyes, never to open them again. Eyes closed, spirit separated from body, body separated from shadow. I pictured Dudley in his guayabera and elegant brimmed hat, in all his radiance and glory. I hear him advise me, David, never take advantage when you have the advantage. Life is not about the money. Life is about self-love, love of language, love of culture, love of literature. To love is to do for another. I hear the voice of Tomás say, tú eres mi otro yo, mi media naranja y medio limón. Dudley Brooks, presente.
So this was a very moving and strong experience for us. We Mexicans and Chicanos, we put altars in our homes for Day of the Dead to share a moment with our departed and the people who has passed. And during Day of the Dead, we put out food, we put out candles, and we commune with them. A lot of the times we'll go to the graveyards and have music and bring some tequila or beer or agua fresca or candy or whatever your departed person enjoyed, and you will spend time with them and you will listen to their music and you will honor them and you bring them into your everyday life again. No, they're always present and they're with you, they're part of you. So when David came to Mexico to record this video piece, this altar was going to be a tribute to Tomás Ibarra Frausto, who is this amazing Chicano scholar who came up with the term of rascuachismo, this concept of aesthetic of Chicano, where more is more. And one thing that Chicanos do as well is they take a derogatory term and they change it and they appropriate it and they own it, and then it does not turn into an insult anymore. Is their own word. So someone will call it a rascuache, it's chafa, no? So they will tell like, no, rascuachismo is a whole aesthetic posture and way of being. So when we were in Mexico about to start the recording of this series of poems that David wrote, and then there's also a really funny glossary at the end, Tomás' partner, Dudley, died that day, the day before we were going to record the video. And David was incredibly affected because he was very, very close to both of them. And that changed the whole direction of the altar. And it was now dedicated to this gay couple that were together for 50-something years, that in the Chicano tradition was not very easy to come out of the closet. It was kind of a very macho-oriented kind of movement and posture, and they kind of broke the ceiling, and they were this incredibly supportive, amazing, loving couple. And David was working in the video while this happened. So this this altar. It celebrates life and it celebrates the death, and it is this mix of emotions, and David said it really beautiful in all his poetry. So you will find like the Cuatli in the back, Mexica, goddess, gods, and then photographs of all these different. But yeah, this was.
It was super fun to create with the artist too, if I can add, Greta.
Yeah.
He was here in Vancouver for a week, and we learned how to make, we brought some of the flowers, we made some flowers. He kept adding things. There was an aesthetic that he was going to, in order you could see life and love and vibrancy. It was really fun to work with an artist. We're going to wrap up with one last, because Greta mentioned the Virgin of Guadalupe. So on the other wall across the hallway from David Zamora Casas's altar are two exquisite small photographs, both that show by Al Rendon, both that show the Virgin of Guadalupe. One tattooed on the chest of a poet named Raul Salinas, and the other on a bedspread, his auntie, Tia Maria, on her bedspread. Just to show you the role of photography as well. So you've gotten a quick insight into what Xicanx, Dreamers and Changemakers exhibition is. It's up until January 15th here at the museum. And
January 1st.
I think we're going to extend it to the 15th.
Oh, wow.
Yes, exciting. But there's many other artists in the show. We encourage you to come down and see it in person. We also encourage you to have a look at the Xicanx Digital. You can, as Greta said, you can get some good recipes, but also there's a pretty good playlist on Spotify as part of that, and a great reading list, because we asked some of the artists, what are they reading? What motivates them? So Sasha, there is some time for questions?
Yes, thank you. So there's, you mentioned about that you could talk more about just the process of curating the whole exhibit and whatnot. And I understand from talking with Greta earlier too, that obviously it was a little bit different maybe than was expected, because you all began working together in March 2020. So if you want to maybe start out a little bit, the two of you talking about that, and then I'll field questions as they come in on the question answer function.
Yes, well, it is there's probably a story to write here, Greta, eh? When we started, we did our first artist visits actually in February of 2020, just in advance of the pandemic. And that was the only second time I'd ever met Greta de León. I flew to San Antonio and she flew to San Antonio, and we met there and we went and visited, I don't know, maybe 20 different artists and studios.
I'm gonna have to say something there, Jill, because I think this was a premonition.
A premonition?
Yeah, because do you remember you lost your flight?
Uh-huh.
So we ended up starting to do studio visits with artists on what that time was Skype. I think it was Skype. Yes. It was not Zoom. So I was walking around with a computer. Jill was sitting in an airport. I was in the studio of the artist showing to Jill the works, and we were both talking like for the first time about like the nitty and gritty of the works, and she was, it was kind of like premonitions of what was about to come. So we were prepared for the pandemic and Zoom work.
I had forgotten that. My flight got delayed, so my connections didn't work, and I was in a corner in the Seattle airport on my laptop, sitting there in a corner trying to find quiet space while you met Tomás Iberofrasto, and Dudley, and I met
And
them
Matthew.
via, that's right. Al Rendon, the photos we just saw, I saw his studio virtually. So we did get to see a few of the artists in real life, which is amazing. And, you know, in the best of all worlds, the best way to do it, because then you get to have a cup of tea or coffee and visit and see a breadth of their work. But after the pandemic hit, I was actually visiting artists in Los Angeles for this show, and the world shut down, as we all know, on March 13th. So I flew home. And after that, we continued to meet some artists, but it was via Zoom. And they walked us around their studios, or they showed us images of their work. And then Greta and I worked on which works we wanted in the show. You go back and forth and you say this one, not that one. And then sometimes some of the work you want, you can't have because there's a whole challenge in bringing artwork. It has to be available. We worked at choosing colors. I vividly remember a meeting where Greta was, I think, in Mexico at the time, on Zoom for sure. And we were choosing colors for the walls. And we had to make sure that the color that she saw on the screen was as accurate as possible to the real color, because sometimes color morphs in technology. It was an amazing process. We worked with exhibition designer Skuka Broom and graphic designer Cody Rocco. And it's such a back and forth process. This is not, the artist says this and the curator says that. It's a much more collaborative, many conversations. And I think that
wonderful, because at the time would you also like digest a lot of your thinking process and kind of like points and zoom on what you actually want to say in the exhibition by all of these talks and discussions. From one of the things that Jill and I, we were very lucky because we kind of struck gold in the collaboration. We both like a lot of the same things and were concerned about the same issues and wanted to showcase. We didn't want to explain to you what Chicano art is supposed to be. We want them to explain, and we just gave them the room. And that's why also a lot of the poetry is in the walls and a lot of the fragments of conversations of thoughts the same, because we wanted to amplify those voices. And so when you're working with someone and you're co-curating a show, you're both coming from very different perspectives and different histories and backgrounds. But for us, we were lucky and we had the same intentions and ideas. So I was very joyful also to work with Skuka and Cody in the whole notion of the exhibit. So with everybody, it's a really beautiful show, and I hope you guys can go see it in person as well.
Yeah, I remember one thing. I think we're probably getting close to the end here, but I remember one time, I think for the walls where the quotes are and the poetic excerpts, I think at one point, Greta and I had a list of 40 quotes we thought we would use. You go deep and you go broad and you learn a whole bunch of stuff, and then your job is to whittle it down, make it understandable, and don't overwhelm people, and let the art speak for itself instead of a lot of text telling you how to think and what to think. So it was really important. The end movement was, we really agreed 100% that our job as curators in this exhibition was to hold the microphone to the artists and for their work and their words to speak.
Yeah.
That actually segues very nicely into the next question, which is, how did you choose the poetry that ended up on the walls? So you mentioned you started out with a lot. How did we get to the final round?
Well, I think we started with a lot before we had actually started to organize the show. So we had organized the works, so we know which artworks were coming. We hadn't started to organize the artworks because they have to be grouped and to make some access. Artwork needs to speak to each other in the room. So they can't, this is not a solo show. So they're different artists, different traditions. So we needed to make sure the artwork spoke to each other. So once we started doing these themes of neighborhoods, homes, identity, activism, and borderlands, then that helped us started to whittle down some of the quotes to make sure that the quotes spoke directly to those ideas. And the more direct and powerful, because so many people, particularly in Vancouver, the show would work in a different way if it was in an American city or in a Mexican city. So we had to remember that we also had to let people know that they might not know some of these poets. They might not know many of these artists. So our job was not to teach them a history, but to open a door. Would you share that idea, Greta?
Indeed, I will share that idea. And also to have a diversity of the works, that we will have the same number of women writers as male writers. We constantly had that concern that we will give them the same room and so that was important for us as well. And we selected the works also having really old fragments of kind of like the essential poems or texts by the Chicano movement, as well as really, really new ones, poems like the one behind Jill or others. I mean, there's that, we wanted to showcase that variety. You can also read all the text in the chicanxart.com.
Wonderful, thank you. And let's go for one last one, which is always, I think, a nice one. What are your favorite works in the exhibition?
That's
All
so
of them.
hard.
All of them. Depends on depends on the day. For me,
It depends on the day. Okay, I like that. Today, my favorite work is.
Exactly. Today, my favorite work is Esther Hernandez's.
So Libertad. So today, my favorite work is Citlali. And that's mostly because, well, I think it's good any day, but we had the pleasure of having Deborah Kutzpel-Vasquez in Vancouver last week in person to give some artist talks. So her energy is still in the room for me. So this would be my favorite work today.
I'm gonna do a disclaimer, Jill, because that's your favorite work a lot of the days. A lot.
How can you go wrong with such a powerful woman?
It's you, that's your alter ego. I totally.
That's right. When I leave here and I take my black jacket off, I could be Citlali.
That's wonderful. That was a very graceful way of answering. It depends on the day, but I think that's very true for a lot of art, right? Because like the whole point is it sort of speaks to you at different stages in your life, and that could just be also just different parts of your day too. Thank you so much to Greta and Jill for sharing your time and your knowledge with us today. That was incredible. The exhibition looks amazing, and I know we only saw the tiniest part of it, but it is going on until, it sounds like, January 15th, not just January 1st, which is very exciting. So I do hope that our attendees will have a chance to visit the museum and see the art in person. It looks like it'd be so amazing to walk through that space for sure.
Can I just make a pitch about coming to the museum?
Yes, please do.
Indigenous people are always free at MOA, and Thursday nights we have a flat rate of $10.
Wonderful, thank you. That's important, good information to know for sure.
And also,
Also
check a lot of the programming on the website, because they will have other artist talks. I'm going to be there in a couple of weeks with some of the other artists, and they're always doing tours and visits. So it's pretty great, and workshops. So
we're celebrating Day of the Dead this year at MOA. So on November 1st, which is an important celebration in the Mexican American calendar, we're going to be open late that Tuesday, and there'll be so much fun. Mariachi, an Aztec group, there'll be pan de morte, which is a little cake, hot chocolate, tours. So you can come out that night and have some fun.
That sounds absolutely amazing. For the attendees, I did put the Xicanx exhibit website off of the Museum of Anthropology in the chat. So you can click on that and see some of these great events that are still coming up. And then also related, here is the link for Xicanx Digital, which is the online platform that has been made to accompany the exhibit. There is so much information on it. Our curators already mentioned that there's like recipes and playlists and reading recommendations along with the art, and then also a lot of information just about how everything was put together. And it's so great, especially if you are gonna sort of extend on this with your classes later on, which would be amazing. I did mention at the beginning that it is being recorded. So once it is uploaded to the website, I will be sending out a link to the video to everyone who is registered. So you can also use that as an extension later on, maybe accompanying your visit to Xicanx Digital, and then maybe a visit in person to the exhibit. And also Greta and Jill have generously offered to answer any further questions from the audience. So if in your conversations with your classes or colleagues later on, you have some questions that you would love to know the answer to, please send your questions to teens@vpl.ca, and we will collate them and forward them to Greta and Jill to continue the conversation. Thank you all so much for being here this morning. It was lovely to spend the morning with you and with Greta and Jill and with the art. I had a wonderful time. I know everyone else did as well. Have a wonderful day, everybody. We'll see you around. Bye.
Have a great day.